Well, greetings, everybody. Today is Wednesday, and that means this is Facebook Live. And you're here for the 7 dilemmas of leading. We're doing a bit of a wrap up on the 4th dilemma today, resistance to risk-taking. Remember, what we're talking about here is not an either or. We're talking about a balance between the two. I'm Janet M. Harvey, CEO of inviteCHANGE, and it's my great privilege to be here to share this series that we're running all year long. inviteCHANGE is a company dedicated to generative coaching, building cultures where people love to work. And I'm sharing this particular quote with you. It's what's in my heart, living in my heart today, about all that we are navigating as a society, not just here in America, everywhere in the globe. And I was listening to an African-American historian from Yale University a couple of weeks ago, and he said in his talk that now is the time to transform our moral imagination. And that really rang true for me. And none of us can unsee, we cannot unsee injustice. It's just as simple as that. Whether we're suffering with the pandemic response or the economic hardship that's created and revealed the injustice in our economics around the world, or the racial bias that we're all navigating and finding our way through, we must choose a path forward with greater integrity, greater respect, and greater decency. No one of us is safe in the world if anyone isn't safe in the world. And that's a belief system, of course, that we carry here at inviteCHANGE. And what do we do for companies and the leaders and teams that are inside of them? These are the 3 things that are fundamental to all of our generative work. How do each of us, even if we're only leading ourselves, practice a generative approach to be original, to be creative learners, and to be people who produce positive change in the world? Every choice we make is that. So when authentic individuals initiate competitive advantages through bold engagement, that's how we unleash the potential of every leader that lives inside of our organizations, so that we can be the cause. Leaders that continuously evolve culture, that strengthens sustainable excellence in the work of our teams and our organizations, and therefore for our customers and the communities in which we operate. These are the promises of work with inviteCHANGE. So the 7 dilemmas, where the heck did this come from? I've been a professional coach since the early 90s. And about 10 years ago, I started to examine what I thought some of the patterns were that showed up in my work with executive leaders and with the teams they lead. And while this question on the slide, what's not working in your organization that keeps you up at night, has been around for a very, very long time. And sometimes people will say to me, nobody answers that question anymore. Well, I still ask it. And I have executives who often will simply pause, take a moment, take a breath, and realize that there are a lot of things keeping them up at night right now. And when they're not sleeping, it means they're not at their best the next day. And the power of a coaching interaction is a time to step back and reflect and get a sense for, how are we meeting the dilemma of the moment? What is being called for here? What's the balance that's important to strike? And out of my curiosity a decade or so ago, I started to collect the most common dilemmas, and the 7 dilemmas came out of that. So here's a quick snapshot for you. In the first quarter of the calendar year, we looked at the control to agility, and the second, conformity to contribution. In this quarter, we've been looking at apathy to inspiration, and here we're finishing up on the 4th one, resistance to risk-taking. Keep tuning in. In Q3, we'll be looking at competition to collaboration, conflict to breakthrough, and then in Q4, entitlement to self-responsibility. And then what's next? How do we go beyond? What does it mean to be in the generative wholeness way? So let's jump right in. Resistance to risk-taking. The 2 images, I think, speak for themselves. I want to amplify it just a little bit. On the left-hand side, you can see someone working really hard, efforting against a very large rock to get it up the hill. And there's a natural resistance of gravity that occurs. Sometimes resistance is pretty smart. We have something that's unsafe. It doesn't make sense to pursue it. So we resist action. The question is, are we doing that from habit because of some history and maybe some baggage we're carrying? Or are we doing it consciously, being at choice about what relationship do we want to the situation that's in front of us? And of course, the other side of this spectrum is risk-taking. Now, one might argue that jumping off the cliff before examining whether there are rocks underneath where we're jumping would be a foolish risk to be taking. On the other hand, if you've been swimming in those waters before and you know exactly how to gauge the timing of the tides and you've done your homework, you've scoped it out, you're taking a responsible risk. And it's allowing you to have the thrill of something that you find pleasurable or inspiring, perhaps, in the case of a business taking a risk to pursue a new market or to change something that's going on in the organization. Every situation presents the opportunity to examine, where do I want to be on the spectrum from resistance on one side to risk-taking on the other? We usually want a little bit of both, to be wise and safe, and at the same time to trust our ability to make good, reasonable assessments about what will be useful to us. And there you go. There is Sylvia Goldschall, COVID-19 survivor at 108 years old. You know, her internal system said, I was determined to survive. She is one of those amazing people, spunky, feisty, outspoken character, according to the staff at the elder care facility. There is a big life force in her, and she's an example of someone who clearly in her life has taken some risks to keep on going, even though there is a resistance to the aging process. And somewhere in the balance, she's still smiling. Look at that. And something far more serious here. Yes, Black Lives Matter. Oh my gosh, that this is the way in which we have to be brought awake. And what does it take for us to shift taking risk, to say what we see, to stand for what matters to us? Core values. What are our core values about human life and human responsibility and human choice? How do we be in integrity in every place we walk, in every person, in every conversation that we have? What is our sense of mission and purpose as an individual and in our families and in our communities? How do we open to the world as it is, not as we thought it could be, or as someone told us it was, or something we've read in the paper, but take responsibility for seeing what's actually happening right in front of us, and to open to the notion of decency and gentleness and bravery, to have the conversation and say, what's possible when we meet the world as it is? As Forbes wrote recently, it's now smart business to embrace activism. And I think underneath this is that sense of no one of us walks alone. We all live in a system. We live in the human system. We live in the planet Earth system. We live in the city, county, state, nation that we are in. We live in a 24-hour clock and the cycles of the moon and the sun. These are all ways in which, when we lift our head up and realize that we're not alone, and every choice we make is having an impact or an influence on someone else, now we slow down a little bit and we start to see what is in the best interest of both the collective and the individual. That's each one of us has a responsibility to pursue. And as this image perhaps displays, then when we're activated so intensely, we bring a certain unity. And this is the force of change, which puts us in a place of being able to invite what we want, not just derail and reel against what we don't want. You know, ultimately, when we work inside of organizations, give them an opportunity to start this reflection process and see where they are on the spectrum. In the first week, improving the workplace environment. How are you as leaders fostering trust? Well, how do you care about your people so that they are performing, not the other way around? And how do we focus on learning, not failing? Of course, I know that that's a really wonderful agile concept. And yet, if we focus on learning, now we get excited about seeing the next experiment and originating new thinking. Once we start in this mindset of improving the workplace environment, the second week, creating some pathways to team success. What are our capabilities? Just because we're facing challenges doesn't mean those assets went away. They're still absolutely there. How do we connect people to their capabilities and the contribution that's there for them to offer themselves and to offer to customers? How do they lean into each other and collaborate and to remember to celebrate? We are still moving forward. Maybe not in the way we originally imagined, but we can reimagine our future. And that's the generative quality of create. And in week 3, to have some curiosity with where our resistance is. It's normal, absolutely. In fact, if human beings weren't a little uncertain about getting back into being in crowds and being in a physical workspace, I'd think twice about whether we were really paying attention to our own well-being as well as our responsibility for others' well-being. What do we learn from? We learn from our resources and data, from our self-awareness. What's happening for me? From the progress we are making and the celebration that goes with that. In week 4, it's the time to open up and say, what is the reasonable, feasible risk for us to take? What sort of internal support system do we have in our organization to get moving again? Where might we look outside and start to partner and collaborate in our community? There's just tremendous innovation going on here in Seattle that I've been reading about almost daily with companies that have in one business model completely been shut down and reinvented themselves within a couple of business weeks. Risk is a muscle. We need to work it every day and to remember we have the capacity to produce what we want. And of course, now when we have that risk-taking muscle being exercised, we can improve our workplace climate every single day. It starts with me as a leader, you as a leader of self and then of others. And when we examine what the gap is and how people are getting prepared to return to work, we can focus and choose ways to be better than before. A little bit of learning and creating on the way to producing results. So here's a little 5-week formula to think about how to reimagine your future as you return to work and to find that balance between resistance and risk-taking. We have a wonderful program we've launched today, as a matter of fact, 3 steps in 30 days to return to work better than before. Workplace climate is something you can influence very quickly, and it really is in the hands of the leader and how the leader is in relationship to their people and to the organization at large and the work you do with your customers. So we've set up these 3 steps. This is all complimentary, available to you. And if you go to invitechange.com/return to work, you can take the leader mindset inventory. Give yourself some insights about who are you now as you've navigated the last 12 or 13 weeks of this environment we're all in, and then have a complimentary consultation with one of our relationship advisors, looking at your report and some of the recommendations it's suggesting for how you might transform your workplace climate. And then ultimately, a third discussion with that relationship advisor, partnering with them as your coach to help you build a recovery roadmap. So 3 steps, 30 days, all complimentary for you at Return to Work. If you find that useful, what I've just been talking about, resistance to risk-taking, there's lots more where that came from. You'll see tips from all of our professional coaches on how to live and work with more purpose, play, and potential. And this is, of course, an ongoing series that we're doing here on Facebook Live. However, it's only 15 minutes. And if you have really enjoyed this, know that one of our philanthropic commitments as an organization is to social progress. And we're hosting a conference. It happens every other year. This happens to be our inaugural event in September. And we'd love to have you join us and learn about systemic change and to resource yourself, to give back into your community in causes that you care about. climate emergency, healthy communities, and human trafficking. And we'll be in that co-learning space together in order to kick off projects to make a big difference in the world. We know that coaching amplifies and accelerates the results that every person is able to produce in the world. And we want to spread that along all the pathways of the globe. So go to BeChooseCause.com and join us in September. That's all I have for you today. I hope you've taken something useful. And remember, when we accept the world the way it is, we can open to the possibility of gentleness, decency, and bravery all around us. Cheers. Have a good rest of your day.